I still remember the first time her hand brushed mine. It wasn't dramatic, no sparks exploding in the air, no music swelling behind us, but it lingered long enough for me to notice the little things. The softness of her skin, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her sleeves, the way her fingers trembled ever so slightly before she pulled away. That hesitation was the hook, the part of her that made me stop mid-step, like someone had pressed pause on the world. I was 22, and she was older. Much older. Mid-40s, I guessed, with hair streaked silver at the temples and eyes that held more years than I had lived. Yet she moved with a quiet confidence that made everyone else fade into the background. She didn't need to talk, her presence said enough. But that morning, in that half-empty cafe where the sunlight fell sideways across cracked wooden tables, she chose to sit near me. And when she did, the air between us thickened. I was staring at my coffee, pretending to check my phone, but I could feel her gaze even without looking. There was curiosity there, yes, but something softer, almost tentative. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, fingers brushing her jaw, and I wanted to memorize that motion. But I didn't. I didn't even want to make it obvious that I noticed. She ordered a tea, quietly, almost shyly, and when she sat across from me, her knee brushed mine. Again, it was small, accidental, or maybe not, but my pulse picked up anyway. I tried to tell myself it was ridiculous, that she probably didn't even know I existed, that she was a woman with a life decades more complicated than mine. And yet, she laughed at something I muttered under my breath, a sound that warmed the chill that had settled over me since the cafe opened. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make her look at me and see me, but my words stuck in my throat. Instead, I studied her hands, long, elegant fingers wrapped around her cup, knuckles pale as she squeezed slightly too hard. She caught me staring. For a second, our eyes locked, and I thought I saw recognition. A flicker of understanding. And then she smiled, small, private, like she was hiding a secret, and my chest tightened. It was then, the moment I least expected, that her hand brushed mine. A fleeting touch as she reached for the sugar, but instead of pulling away immediately, her fingers lingered on mine. That little pause lasted just long enough for me to feel something I couldn't name. Desire? Curiosity? Maybe both. My palm grew warm under hers, and I thought if someone had asked me to describe happiness in a single instant, this would be it. And then the world intruded. The cafe door swung open with a clang, and a cold draft rolled in, scattering napkins across the floor. She pulled back quickly, glancing toward the noise, but not without a hint of disappointment in her eyes. I wanted to reach out, to grab her hand again, but she was already looking away, sipping her tea as if nothing had happened. I almost didn't notice the little tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes kept flicking back toward me when she thought I wasn't watching. I wanted to follow her, to ask her name, to say something, anything, but my voice caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number, words that made my stomach drop and my hands sweat. I glanced up at her just in time to catch her looking at me with the faintest crease of worry between her brows. Our eyes met for a heartbeat longer than comfortable, and I realized something undeniable. I couldn't stop thinking about her. And maybe, somehow, she couldn't stop thinking about me either. Before I could even consider what to do next, the cafe door opened again. A shadow fell across the floor, and I noticed the world outside waiting, full of interruptions, rules, and reasons to pull us apart. But her hand had brushed mine. And that was enough to make me believe in the impossible. I kept replaying that touch, over and over, like a secret melody I wasn't supposed to know. Her hand had lingered, just long enough to make me feel alive, but short enough to leave me aching for more. She sat across from me again the next morning at the same cafe. This time, there was a quiet weight in her eyes, a subtle hesitation I could almost, but not quite, read. She stirred her tea slowly, fingers brushing the rim, and I wondered if she could feel the tension in the air between us, too. I shouldn't have been thinking about it. She was older, worldlier, experienced in ways I wasn't. She carried herself like someone who'd been hurt, who knew the cost of letting someone in. I, in comparison, was reckless with my heart, prone to falling too fast, caring too much. I should have left the cafe, walked away, and convinced myself that this infatuation was temporary. But I didn't. I didn't expect to see you again, she said softly, almost like a confession. She wasn't looking at me directly, eyes scanning the steam rising from her cup. Neither did I admitted, though the truth was I had been hoping for it all morning, standing outside the cafe, watching the door swing open. She laughed, but it was brief, a touch brittle. I sensed something in her past she was guarding, an old heartbreak, maybe, or a series of choices she regretted. The lines around her eyes weren't just age, they were stories she didn't tell. For my part, I was still learning to navigate my own mistakes. I'd been burned before, and I carried that quiet shame, the kind you don't voice, that sits in your chest like a bruise. She didn't need to know about my failed attempts at love, the times I'd been rejected, the nights I'd stared at my ceiling wishing someone would see me the way I wanted to be seen. And yet, there we were. The risk was there, simmering beneath the surface. People would talk if they saw us together. She was at an age where discretion mattered. I was at one where impulsiveness reigned. I could almost hear the unspoken warnings in her pauses, the way she sometimes hesitated before she reached for her cup, as if measuring how close she could get without stepping over some invisible line. Despite it all, she leaned forward slightly, her elbow brushing mine. A spark ran through me at the contact, not just physical, but intimate, charged with unspoken understanding. We didn't speak for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. And in that silence I realized something. This wasn't just attraction. This was recognition. Someone finally seeing me, not the person I pretended to be for the world, but the one I kept hidden. Her eyes flicked up, catching mine, and I felt it again. That same warmth from before, tempered with caution, curiosity, and maybe even longing. I wanted to reach across the table, touch her hand again, and tell her everything I couldn't say out loud. But I didn't. Instead, I let her presence speak. I let the tension linger, thick as the steam curling from our drinks. And when she brushed her fingers against mine as she passed the sugar, I didn't pull away. Not yet. Because for the first time, I didn't want to. I should have left when I saw him, the man who always seemed to appear at the worst possible moments. Her husband, or ex-husband, maybe, I didn't know for sure. What I did know was that he carried the kind of authority that could make her smile politely while her eyes flickered with caution. I was holding the door open for her when he appeared in the cafe doorway, tall, sharp suit, and that practiced, easy charm that made people like him immediately. She froze, her hand tightening around her teacup, her knuckles pale. I felt the shift before words were even exchanged, the subtle pull of caution, the quick glance she stole in my direction. "Good morning, Claire," he said, voice smooth, almost casual. He didn't look at me, but I felt his awareness. His presence was a warning, a reminder of boundaries I had no right to cross. "Morning," she replied, soft, measured. Her hand lingered on the table a second too long after brushing mine, like she was giving herself courage. I could see her pulse in her wrist, the faint trembling I wanted to trace with my fingers. I wanted to disappear, but I stayed. I had to. As they talked, I noticed her lips twitch, almost smiling, almost laughing, but it was guarded. Her eyes kept flicking toward me, that same unspoken question hanging in the air. Do I dare? Could I? Should I? After he left, finally, with a polite nod and a tight-lipped smile, she exhaled, and I heard it. A soft release of tension, like the air had been holding its breath for us both. My heart was racing, my chest tight, and I wanted to reach across the table, to close the distance between us. "Do you want to get out of here?" I asked, voice almost too low to carry across the empty space. She hesitated. Her fingers twitched near the rim of her cup, and for a moment she didn't answer. Then, "Maybe we should wait." Wait. That one word carried everything: restraint, warning, desire, fear. I wanted to argue, to pull her into my arms and let the world fall away. But I nodded, swallowing the groan rising in my throat. I could see the same struggle in her eyes, the flicker of longing, the pull of temptation that she fought against. Later, we walked outside together, shoulder to shoulder, but neither of us spoke. The street was quiet, shadows stretching long under the street lamps. I could feel her warmth, smell the faint hint of her perfume, and I wanted to reach for her hand, just once. My fingers itched. Then she stopped abruptly. "Don't," she whispered, as if afraid someone might hear. Her gaze dropped to the pavement. I didn't move, didn't speak. I could feel the words pressing against my chest, heavy and dangerous. "I want you." Her hand brushed mine again, fleetingly, and then she stepped back. My pulse thudded in my ears. A car drove by, headlights slicing across her face, catching in her eyes, and for a second, everything seemed impossibly fragile. She looked at me, a mixture of something like apology and something like promise in her gaze. And then we walked on, silent, our hands inches apart, hearts racing, neither of us willing to take the next step, but neither willing to step away. The night held us suspended, dangling on the edge of something forbidden and irresistible. And I knew, somehow, that we were already too close to turn back. The cafe had emptied, leaving us alone with the hum of the neon sign and the faint scrape of chairs being stacked. I wanted to reach for her hand again, wanted to bridge the distance that logic, circumstance, and 1,000 unspoken rules had built between us. But I didn't. Not yet. She sat, leaning back, arms crossed, her jaw tight. The lines around her eyes deepened in the dim light, shadows betraying the weight she carried. I could feel her tension in every rigid movement, every exhale. She was holding herself together, but for whom? For me? For herself? "I can't," she said, voice breaking before she caught it. Her fingers tapped the table, erratic, betraying her calm facade. "Can't what?" I asked, leaning closer, though my pulse hammered against the restraint I tried to maintain. She looked away, then back at me, eyes glimmering. "I shouldn't, it's reckless." I wanted to argue, to pull her close, to tell her that the reckless part didn't matter. But her words landed anyway, sharp and real, slicing the air between us. I nodded because I understood. I understood more than she thought. I knew the risk, the whispers of judgment, the tangled moral lines. "I don't care," I admitted softly, my fingers brushing against mine unconsciously. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of shock, or maybe desire, passing through them. Then she looked down, hiding her expression. I could almost hear the battle raging behind her calm exterior, longing versus reason, fear versus want. "I can't," she repeated, almost a whisper this time, the tension in her body screaming louder than words. That was when it hit me, something primal, urgent, uncontrollable. I wanted her to fight for me, to let me in. I wanted her to acknowledge the attraction simmering between us, dangerous and undeniable. I wanted her hand on mine, even if it meant breaking everything. She shifted suddenly, glancing out the window at a couple walking past, laughing easily, oblivious to the tension suffocating us inside. Her lips parted, and I thought for a heartbeat she would speak, confess everything, let the walls crumble. And then my phone buzzed, a text from my roommate, asking if I'd be home tonight, oblivious to the storm I was standing in. My hand shook as I glanced at it, my thumb hovering over the screen, wishing I could delete the outside world, wishing I could delete the rules that separated us. Her gaze caught mine again, unwavering now, like she had read the chaos behind my eyes. She leaned forward, just a fraction, her breath mingling with mine. My chest tightened, every nerve in my body screamed for more. I wanted to reach for her, to close the impossible distance, but a part of me froze, trapped by the fear that this single moment could ruin everything, could make the risk too real to survive. "Don't," she whispered, her voice low, trembling. I swallowed hard, leaning closer anyway, heart racing, knowing that the next second could change everything. And then, the cafe door swung open. A shadow fell across the floor, and the world intruded, pulling us back from the edge. We didn't move. We didn't speak. But the silence itself roared, heavy and expectant, as if holding its breath for the decision neither of us could yet make. The night had felt suspended in that delicate, dangerous balance, the kind that made every glance, every breath, feel amplified. I thought we had a rhythm, an unspoken agreement to linger on the edge without falling. And then everything cracked. My phone buzzed again. I had ignored it until now, until I realized the screen was flashing her name, her full name, on someone else's phone. A photo, sent by someone else. A message she hadn't meant for me to see. I froze, stomach twisting. It was a screenshot, her sitting at the cafe, laughing at a text, her hand close to another man's. Not me. The world tilted, the moment shattered. I looked up at her, heart hammering, expecting her to brush it off, to reassure me. But her expression was unreadable, tense, almost panicked. I didn't, she began, words faltering, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I didn't want to hear her explanation. I wanted to feel the warmth, the connection we had been building, not this sudden fracture of uncertainty. Who? I managed, voice tight, low. Her lips parted, and I could see the guilt flashing in her eyes. It's my son's friend, she said, rushing, trying to explain, but it only made my chest tighten further. I didn't, it was just a text. Nothing else. Please don't. But the damage was done. The trust one hadn't fully given, the control I thought I had over my heart, it all felt fragile now. I wanted to believe her, wanted to reach for her hand and pull her close, but doubt had crept in like a shadow. I saw it, I said finally, voice shaking. I saw you, laughing at him, touching his hand. Just like. I trailed off, because I couldn't articulate the ache, the fear, the jealousy clawing at me. Her gaze fell, and I saw the weight of years in that look, the careful lines of her face, the restraint in her gestures. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She just let the silence stretch, letting me fill it with my own assumptions. I didn't mean to, she whispered, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to hate her, to push her away, to protect myself from falling too fast, from feeling too much. But I couldn't. The pull was magnetic, irresistible, a tether I couldn't sever even with my rational mind screaming. I stepped closer, chest aching, gaze locked with hers. I can't stop thinking about you, I said, and for the first time, my voice cracked with vulnerability, raw and unpolished. She took a hesitant step toward me, her hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. 1,000 silent apologies danced in her eyes, mixed with desire, longing, and fear. And then the cafe lights flickered, casting long shadows across her face, emphasizing every line, every tension. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what we would do next. I wanted to grab her, to erase the doubts, to prove that this, us, was more than a fleeting mistake. But the twist had changed everything. What I thought was simple, safe, and intimate was suddenly complicated, fragile, and precarious. Her hand hovered near mine, trembling slightly, the air thick with unspoken words. And in that suspended second I realized, nothing would ever feel safe again, not until we risked it all. The cafe had emptied completely. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed, the faint smell of coffee lingering like a memory. I could feel the tension in the air, dense and electric, every heartbeat echoing between us. We had circled each other long enough, glances, touches, hesitations, but now it came down to this, truth or silence. Love or fear. She sat across from me, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers twisting a napkin like she was trying to ground herself. I wanted to reach across the table, to erase all the months of restraint, but I paused. I had learned by now that rushing her would only push her away. I can't stop thinking about you, I said quietly, letting the words hang, unpolished, raw. They trembled as they left my lips, but I didn't care. She met my gaze, her eyes wide, vulnerable, and for a moment I thought the world had shrunk to just the two of us. You know this is risky, she whispered, voice breaking. Her lips trembled, not from cold but from the weight of what she was about to admit. I've always tried to keep everything in check. Her hand shook as she put the cup down, and then she reached for mine. A simple touch, but it carried all the longing, all the fear, all the months of stolen glances and whispered thoughts. My hand tingled where hers rested, warm, alive, real. I don't care about the risks, I said, leaning forward, closing the distance I'd let linger too long. I don't care if it's complicated. I just want you. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not the ones of regret. They were acknowledgement, relief, recognition. She let out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding, and for the first time, she let herself be seen. I want you too, she admitted, barely above a whisper, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. But I don't know if I can do this without falling completely. Then fall, I said, and my hand found hers fully, fingers intertwining naturally. Fall with me. She hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing her face, and I saw it, the careful walls she had built over decades, the lessons learned from mistakes and heartbreak. I understood them all, understood her need to measure, to hesitate. And still, I wouldn't let her pull away. Her lips parted slightly, a breath shared between us, and I leaned closer. Our foreheads touched first, a quiet acknowledgement, a promise. Everything in me wanted to close the gap completely, to kiss her, to erase all the months of longing and restraint in one messy, beautiful instant. But I stopped, just a fraction, letting the moment linger. No words. No sudden moves. Just her hand in mine, her warmth pressed against my chest, and the knowledge that this was ours now, fragile, impossible, but undeniable. The cafe door creaked open somewhere in the background, a reminder that the world existed beyond this bubble. But for once, it didn't matter. We were here. We were present. We were choosing each other. And in that suspended silence, with her fingers gripping mine, I realized love had won for now. But what happened next? Well, that was up to us. The morning sun filtered through the cafe blinds, dust motes drifting lazily in the light, and for the first time in weeks, the world felt quiet, unhurried. I sat across from her, hands still intertwined, tracing the familiar warmth, the curve of her fingers, memorizing it like a secret map. She sipped her tea, eyes soft but alert, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. There was no panic now, no fear of interruption, no shadows of what is pressing down on us. We had survived the risk, survived the unspoken rules, and survived ourselves, the doubts, the hesitation, the temptation to pull back. I still can't believe this, she murmured, her voice low, almost teasing, though the tremor in it betrayed a lingering vulnerability. I didn't think I'd ever take this leap again. I shrugged, though my chest was tight with relief and anticipation. Neither did I admitted. But here we are. And honestly, I'm glad we didn't run. Her eyes found mine, steady now, no masks, no careful guarding. There was trust there, fragile but real, and a quiet joy that hadn't been possible before. We laughed softly, a shared sound that seemed to echo in the empty cafe, marking this moment as ours alone. We didn't need grand gestures or dramatic confessions anymore. A touch, a shared glance, a brush of fingers across the table. They said everything words never could. Every stolen look, every whispered conversation, every moment of hesitation had led to this: honesty, acceptance, and the quiet thrill of being chosen. Outside, the city moved on, cars honking, people walking briskly, but inside, time slowed, bending around us. She reached across and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her hand lingering just long enough for me to feel the weight of her decision, the depth of her care. I smiled, leaning into it, letting her warmth sink into me. We talked about little things, weekend plans, errands, music, but beneath the surface was an understanding neither of us needed to voice. We had found something rare, something worth the risk, the taboo, the hesitation. It wasn't perfect, it was real, messy, human. And that made it perfect in its own way. Eventually, we stood together, stepping out into the sunlight. Her hand found mine naturally, fingers curling into mine like they had always belonged there. I felt a strange mixture of calm and exhilaration, knowing that this, whatever came next, was ours to navigate together. As we walked down the street, side by side, I realized that some stories didn't need a dramatic ending. Some stories simply needed a moment where hearts chose to stop running and start living. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in beginnings. Not the naive kind, but the kind built from risks, honesty, and a hand that stayed just long enough to mean everything.